The golden glow of a late Saturday afternoon bathed London's cobblestone streets, casting long shadows over the ancient city as the sun dipped below the horizon. Charles Hawthorne, a respected banker whose name carried weight in the financial circles of the capital, stepped out from his stately Sussex mansion, his polished shoes clicking against the stone path. The air was soft, fragrant with blooming roses and the distant hum of summer life. But there was a tension in his stride, a fleeting glance over his shoulder as he passed through the garden gate. He never returned. Like a wisp of smoke caught in a sudden gust, he vanished, leaving behind a mystery that sent ripples of unease through the city's elite. The next morning, I sat with Detective Adrian Leclerc in his cozy Bloomsbury flat, the air rich with the scent of brewing Earl Grey and freshly baked scones. The room, lined with leather-bound books and flickering gas lamps, felt like a sanctuary from the chaos outside. Yet my mind was consumed by the enigma of Hawthorne's disappearance, a puzzle that seemed to defy logic. We awaited Inspector Edward Blake, an old friend whose arrival was marked by a disheveled coat and a face etched with exhaustion. He sank into an armchair, his sigh heavy with the weight of sleepless nights. "Sorry I'm late," Edward muttered, rubbing his temples. "I've been buried in work with Inspector Harold Finch, who's leading the Hawthorne case." Adrian, his sharp eyes glinting with mischief, sipped his tea. "A disappearance? What kind do you reckon this is?" Edward frowned, puzzled. "Kind? What do you mean?" With a theatrical flourish, Adrian set down his cup. "There are 3 types of vanishings, my friend. First, those who choose to flee, escaping debts, scandals, or a life they loathe. Second, those who meet a darker fate, their bodies hidden by a killer's hand. And third, the rarest, those who lose themselves to madness, wandering without purpose or awareness." Edward shrugged, his skepticism evident. A man like Hawthorne, wealthy, connected, couldn't just vanish without a trace. If he was murdered, we'd have found a body by now. And running away? With today's trains and telegraphs, it's near impossible to disappear completely. Adrian's smile was enigmatic, his voice low with intrigue. "Not necessarily. A man determined to vanish, or to make someone else disappear, can weave a plan so intricate that even Scotland Yard would be left grasping at shadows." Edward chuckled, his eyes narrowing. "Scotland Yard might be fooled, but you, Adrian Leclerc? Who'd dare outsmart you?" Adrian waved off the flattery, though his grin betrayed his amusement. "Plenty would try, scientific methods or not." "Finch is no slouch either," Edward countered. "He's a bloodhound, sniffing out every detail, no matter how small." "Precisely," Adrian said, leaning forward. "In a case like this, every detail tells a story. A cigarette stub, a stray hair, a speck of mud on a rug. They're pieces of a puzzle the senses often overlook." Edward's eyes sparkled with challenge. "I'll bet you £5 you can't find Hawthorne, dead or alive, in a week." Adrian's brow arched. "Tell me everything, then. Let's see what I can do." Edward cleared his throat, launching into the tale. "Last Saturday, at 12:40 p.m., Charles Hawthorne boarded a train from Victoria Station to his Sussex estate. He seemed perfectly normal. After afternoon tea, he took a stroll through his sprawling garden, where roses bloomed in fiery reds and soft pinks. He told his wife, Eleanor, "I'm heading to the village to post some letters. If Vincent Crowley stops by, have the staff show him to my study." He walked out the front door, crossed the garden, and passed through the wooden gate. That was the last anyone saw of him. Edward paused, sipping his tea before continuing. 15 minutes later, a man claiming to be Crowley arrived, an older gentleman, impeccably dressed. The butler led him to Hawthorne's study, but after an hour of waiting, Crowley apologized and left. Eleanor saw him to the gate, her worry growing. By Sunday morning, with no sign of Hawthorne, the family alerted the police. We searched the village, the post office, the train station. No trace. His car remained in the garage, and no hired drivers reported seeing him. But that day, a horse race nearby drew a chaotic crowd. If Hawthorne slipped into it, he could have vanished unnoticed. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "A curious detail. Anything else?" Edward's voice grew grim. Monday morning brought a shock. The safe behind a painting in Hawthorne's study was ransacked. The windows were locked, no signs of forced entry. Eleanor said it held bearer bonds, cash, and a fortune in jewelry Hawthorne had been buying lately. Adrian's eyes sharpened. Crowley, has he been detained? We're watching him closely, Edward replied. He's a speculator, had a falling out with Hawthorne over South American investments. They'd been estranged, but Hawthorne invited him to discuss shares. What does Eleanor say about their relationship? Adrian asked. She says it was civil, Edward answered. Eleanor's kind, but not particularly sharp. Hawthorne had rivals, but none seemed murderous. Oh, and the gardener, old Bert, mentioned seeing a figure leave the study and head into the garden that afternoon. He was too far to be sure if it was Hawthorne or someone else. What time did Hawthorne leave? Adrian pressed. Around 5:30 p.m., Edward said. The estate has a lake and a boathouse with over 200 canoes. Finch is planning to drag the lake for clues. Adrian picked up a newspaper, studying a photo of Hawthorne. Curly hair, a thick beard, a pointed chin, bushy brows, and piercing black eyes. Complex, he murmured. But complexity is a good sign. If it were too simple, we'd be chasing a lie. Keep me updated, especially on Finch's findings. I'll find you, man. Edward left, and Adrian turned to me, his smile sly. What do you make of the lake? The boathouse. I shrugged. Maybe he drowned himself, or someone hid his body there. Adrian only smiled, his gaze distant, as if seeing something beyond the walls. The next evening, Edward returned, his face alight with news. We found Hawthorne's clothes, the ones he wore that day, in the lake. No body, but it's a major lead. And we've got Crowley in custody. The maid saw him lingering in the garden before he left. There's more. A petty crook named Jimmy Walsh, with a history of pickpocketing, was arrested Saturday night for causing a scene in a London pub. He was trying to pawn a sapphire ring, Hawthorne's ring. Walsh claims he was at the races, struck out, and rested by a pile of stones. There, he saw a dark-skinned man with a mustache toss the ring and walk away. Walsh grabbed it, thinking he'd hit the jackpot. Adrian shook his head. If Hawthorne was killed, we'd have found a body by now. A thief like Walsh wouldn't dare murder, let alone flaunt a victim's ring. Edward nodded. Walsh's description of the man matches Crowley, but it's absurd to think Crowley would discard a ring so openly. I interjected. Why take the ring off a body at all? Edward's eyes darkened. There's a lime pit near the lake. Lime dissolves flesh, but not jewelry. I shivered. That's horrific. Adrian remained calm. Tell me, do the Hawthornes share a bedroom? Edward blinked, thrown by the question. I don't know. Why does it matter? It's critical, Adrian said firmly. Can you find out? Edward agreed, though clearly baffled. Adrian sank into thought, and I scribbled my theories. Crowley raided the safe. Walsh's story implicates Crowley in the disappearance. Adrian glanced at my notes and chuckled. You've no knack for deduction. Crowley couldn't know Hawthorne would be gone, and cracking a safe requires specialized tools. As for Walsh, you're missing two key details. Hawthorne's recent jewelry purchases and his South American trip last autumn. That's why I asked about their sleeping arrangements. The next day, Edward sent word. Since winter, the Hawthornes had slept in separate rooms. Adrian clapped his hands. There it is. He turned to me. Do you have money in Hawthorne's bank? I shook my head. Adrian grinned. Good. Send a telegram to Edward. Tell him to withdraw his fund from Hawthorne's bank immediately. I complied, though skeptical. 2 days later, the news broke. Hawthorne's bank had collapsed, embroiled in a web of financial scandals. The disappearance took on a new hue. Over dinner, Edward burst in, waving a newspaper, his eyes wide. Adrian, are you a sorcerer? How did you know? Adrian smiled serenely. The safe robbery was too convenient. Cash and jewels gone without a trace. I suspected Hawthorne was converting assets into portable wealth. He filled the safe with decoys, took the real valuables, and vanished under a new identity. He staged a safe break-in, invited Crowley to frame him, and slipped away. But where? Edward leaned forward. Tell me, where's Hawthorne? Adrian looked at me. Where would you hide if you were him? London, I said. It's crowded, easy to blend in. Edward shook his head. I'd go far, somewhere remote. Adrian's eyes twinkled. I'd hide in prison. Edward gaped. Adrian continued. The police are hunting Hawthorne to arrest him, but no one thinks to look for him behind bars. You said Eleanor's not bright, but if she saw Jimmy Walsh, she'd recognize her husband, even with a scruffy beard and tattered clothes. Walsh, Edward exclaimed. He's a known criminal. Exactly, Adrian said. Hawthorne's cleverer than you think. Last autumn, he didn't go to South America. He became Walsh, got himself arrested for a minor scuffle, and spent 3 months in jail to build a false identity. When he needed to disappear, he resumed the role, pawned a ring, and caused a scene to get arrested again. A bold gamble, but the prize is his fortune. A few months in prison is nothing. He wore a fake beard and wig as Hawthorne, which is why he slept apart from Eleanor. The gardener saw a figure leave the study. That was Hawthorne, already dressed as Walsh, tossing his old clothes into the lake. Edward's jaw dropped. Unbelievable. Bring Eleanor to see Walsh, Adrian said. She'll confirm it. The next day, a letter arrived from Edward, enclosing £5. Adrian laughed heartily. Another bet won. Tonight, we dine like kings,